People say you can measure man's true worth by how he treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for him. Arthur knew this better than anyone, which was why he was currently shivering on a damp park bench, wearing a thread coat that smelled faintly of mothballs, damps. He had spent 50 years building an empire of glass and steel, but today, he just wanted to see what kind his tower and buildings on the street size. The biting Chicago wind whipped through the plaza of Sterling Ascendant, a monolithic 60-story skyscraper that dominated the city's financial district. At 72, Arthur's bones felt the chill far more than they used to, but his pale blue eyes remained as sharp and calculating as a hawk's. He watched the morning rush of corporate elite hurrying in the grand marble lobby. They were clad in tailored companies and carrying briefcases filled with contracts that Arthur's own holding company had drafted. None of them spared a second glance for the hunched elder man with a scruffy gray beard sitting near the entrance. To them, he was invisible. Slowly, Arthur pushed him off the bench. Leaning heavily on a cheap wooden cane he bought at a thrift store the day before, he shuffled toward the upscale cafe that occupied the ground floor corner of the lobby. He was genuinely craving a warm cup of coffee. But more importantly, he wanted a closer look at the culture of his company. He pushed open the heavy glass door, the warm scent of roasted espresso and buttery croissants washing over him. As Arthur stepped inside, a man in his early 30s, busy shouting into Bluetooth earpiece, turned sharply and collided right into him. "Watch where you're going," the younger man snapped, of his Spence's charcoal suit as if Arthur were carrying a plague. Arthur stumbled back, dropping the handful of nickels and dimes he had prepared his coffee. He buzzed. The coins scattered the polished floor with a series of sharp, thus embarrassing clink. Arthur looked up, recognized the man instantly. It was Julian Mercer, the newly appointed Vice President of Operation for Sterling's real estate division. Arthur had approved his promotion on paper just last month. By Julian's impressive Ivy League credentials, aggressive profit margins. "I apologize, sir," Arthur said, keeping his voice tensionally raspy and meek. He bent down slowly to retrieve his fallen coins. Julian scoffed, his face twisting into a sneer of pure disgust. "Don't touch me. And what are you even doing in here? This isn't a soup kitchen. The smell alone is going to ruin my morning." He stepped over Arthur's trembling hand, his heavy leather dress shoe deliberately kicking a quarter out of Arthur's reach, sending it spinning under a paste display case. Without another word, Julian adjusted his silk tie and marched toward the Vibe elevators. Arthur remained on the floor for a moment, letting the sting of the indignity wash over him. He was a man who commanded boardrooms with a whisper. And yet, here in the lobby of the building that bore his name, he was treated like garbage. "Here, the please. Let me help you with that." A soft, tired voice broke through the ambient noise of the cafe. Arthur looked up to see a young woman in a green cafe apron kneeling beside him. Her name tag, pinned slight crooked, read Clara. She had dark circles under her eyes, the kind that spoke of sleepless nights and unpaid bills. But her expression held nothing but genuine warmth. Clara quick gathered the remaining coins, reaching the quarter Julian had kicked away, to retrieve the quarter Julian had kept. She gently placed the money into Arthur's weathered palm, helping him to his feet. "Are you all right, sir?" Clara asked softly, her brow furrowed in concern. "I'm fine, young lady. Thank you," Arthur mumbled. "Just wanted a small black coffee." but I seem to be a bit clumsy today." Clara glanced down at the meager pile of change in his hand. It wasn't nearly enough for the overpriced artisanal brews sold in the lobby. Arthur saw a brief flash of Hest cross her face. She looked at the menu board, did a quick mental calculation that made her shoulders slump for a fraction of a second, and then pulled a worn leather wallet from the pocket of her jeans. "It's okay. Breakfast is on me today," Clara smiled, guiding him toward a quiet table in the corner. "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly," Arthur protested. "I insist," she said kindly. "My grandfer used to love his morning coffee. It's the least I can do." As Arthur reached out to steady him on the chair, the oversized, frayed sleeve of coat rode up just a fraction of an inch. For a single second, the harsh cafe lighting caught Stoke A and Nasser. Lang and Sohn watched strapped to his wrist, a masterpiece of horology, worth more than the cafe itself. Clara didn't notice. Already turning toward the counter to place the order, Arthur settled in the chair, adjusting his sleeve to hide the timepiece. Through the floor to sailing windows, he glanced across the street. Parked discreetly in the loading zone was a bracked out Cadillac Escalade. Arthur knew that inside, his head of security was sweating bullets, watching his every move. Arthur smiled faintly. He had come looking for the truth about his empire, and in less than 10 minutes, he had found the worst of it, and perhaps the best of it. As Clara carrying a steaming mug and a warm croissant, Arthur knew this was only the beginning. Arthur wrapped his trembling, that calloused hands around the warm ceramic Clara had set before him. The coffee was rich and dark, and the croissant was perfectly flaky. But it was the profound decent of the gesture that made it the best meal had tasted in years. For a man who regularly dined on Wagyu beef and white truffles, the simple pastry felt like a feast. He took a slow sip, his sharp rim of the mug to study the young woman. Clara was wiping down the adjacent tables, her movements deficient but heavy in illustrating, up close. Arthur noticed the frayed edges of her sleeves and the worn out soles of her sensible black work shoes. She carried a quiet dignity, the kind that reminded him of his late wife, Eleanor, back when they were just two kids in a cramped apartment trying to make ends meet. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on those shoulders, Clara," Arthur said, his voice gentle, dropping some of the raspy frailty he used with Julian Mercer. Clara paused, a damp rag in her hand, and offered a weary, genuine smile. "Just the weight of a Tuesday shift, sir. It gets a little busy in here with the morning corporate rush." "It's more than that," Arthur pressed softly, tapping his cane against the table leg. "You've got the eyes of someone who hasn't slept a full 8 hours since the leaves turned brown." A flicker of surprise crossed Clara's face. For a second, the polite customer service mask slipped, revealing a deep, aching vulnerability. She opened her mouth to reply, perhaps to share a sliver of the burden she was carrying, when the sharp, authoritative click of high heels echoed across the tile floor. "Clara, what exactly is going on here?" The voice like a whip cracking through the cozy atmosphere. Eyes. A woman in a tight, burgundy blazer marched toward them, her face pinched in a permanent scowl. Her name tag identified her as Brenda, the cafe manager. She looked Arthur up and down, her nose wrinkling, as if she had just stepped in something unpleasant. "I leave the floor for 5 minutes to do inventory. We're turning my cafe into a homeless shelter," Brenda hissed, keeping her voice low but dripping with venom. Mr. Mercer, just the stench in the line, but has does. We cater to executives. Claire. Not. This. He's a paying customer. Brenda. Claire replied, keeping her tone respectful but firm. He just wanted of coffee and a warm place to sit. Did he pay? Or did you swipe your card again? Brenda demanded, crossing her arms. I've told you 100 times. Clara. We do not encourage vagrants. It drives away the sterlingest tenants. If property management sees him, we'll lose our lease, and you will lose your job. Not that you can afford to lose it right now. Arthur watched the exchange in silence. He committed Brenda's face to memory, filing it away right next to Julian Mercer's. It fascinated him how quick people adopted a tyrannical authorities when given a tiny sliver of authority. He owned the very walls Brenda was standing in, the floor she was tapping her expensive heels on. And yet she spoke of the property management as if they were gods. Claire looked down, this swallowing her pride. The fight drained out of her instantly. I'm sorry, Brenda. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Now get back behind the counter. The breakfast rush isn't over, Brenda snapped, turning on her heel and playing back toward the kitchen. Clara let out a shaky breath and turned back to Arthur. Her eyes shining with unshed tears, she was fighting, desperate to hold back. I'm so sorry about her. Sir, please, take your time finishing your food. You don't have to leave yet. You shouldn't let people speak to you that way, Clara, Arthur said quietly. Sometimes, you don't have the luxury of talking back, she whispered, a sad smile touching her lips. Enjoy your coffee. She hurried away, disappearing in the small employee break room behind the counter. The door didn't latch properly, leaving a gap just wide enough for sound to escape. Arthur, whose hearing was remarkably sharp for a man of 72, sat perfectly still as he overheard a muffled, panicked phone call. Please, just give me until Friday, Clara was pleading, her voice cracking. I know the rent is late, but my little brother's asthma medication took everything I had this month's eyes. If you lock us out, we have nowhere to go. I just need 3 more days. There was a pause, followed by Clara's stifled sob. Thank you. Thank you. I promise I'll have it. Arthur set his mug down. The coffee had lost its warmth, replaced by a cold, hard knot in his chest. He reached in the deep pocket of his tattered coat. His fingers brushed against a sleek, heavy tungsten card, a limitless black card issued only to a fraction of a percent of the world's elite. He didn't pull it out. Instead, he took a plain paper napkin, ballpoint from as he scribbled a sequence of numbers on it, folded it neatly, and slipped it under the empty ceramic mug. Leaning heavily on his wooden cane, Arthur stood up. He adjusted his collar, his eyes briefly meeting the tinted windows, the Braxley idling outside. It was time to visit the executive suites of Sterling Ascendant. It was time to see exactly what kind of men were running his empire. Arthur stepped of the warm cafe and back in the caverned main lobby of Sterling Ascendant. The soaring, 50-foot ceilings were held up by pillars of imported Italian marble, and the floor was polished to such a high shine it, Arthur could see his own shabby reflection in it. He's asked decades ago. He had sat with the architects, sketching this very room on a slight stained paper napkin. He had wanted the building to feel like a cathedral of industry, a place where hard work and vision were rewarded. Now, looking at the cold, quite clinic efficiency of the space, it just felt like a fortress designed to keep the rest of the world out. He gripped his cheap wooden cane and began the long walk across the lobby executive banks. As he moved, the morning crowd of well-waterest flow in adrods on it. Arise is that some covered their noses, while as if he were a ghost, Bunsey haunting the marble floors. Before Arthur could even reach the silver doors of the elevators, a burly security guard in a sharp black suit stepped directly into his path, blocking the way. "All right, buddy, that's far enough," the guard said, holding up a heavy, calloused hand. His name tag read Davis. "You need a key card to go any further. I'm going to have to ask you to turn around and exit the building." Arthur leaned heavily on his cane, putting on his best performance of a frail, confused old man. "I have business upstairs," he rasped, his voice trembling slightly. "On the 60th floor." Davis let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right. The executive penthouse. Sure you saw. Come on, Pops. Let's go before I have to call the police." Before Arthur could reply, a harsh, familiar voice echoed across the lobby. "Are you completely incompetent, Davis?" Julian Mercer strode over, flanked by two nervous, junior executives holding leather portfolios. Julian's charcoal suit looked crisp, and his hair was slicked back flawlessly, but his face was contorted in absolute fury. He pointed a manicured finger at Arthur. "I bumped into this vagrant 20 minutes ago in the cafe," Julian barked, his voice carrying over the ambient hum of the lobby. "Why is he still breathing in my building? Was I tiny arrivers? Is I a major acquisition meeting this afternoon? If they see this human garbage loitering near the VIP elevators, I will personally see to it that you are working night shifts at a toll booth. Do you understand me?" Davis stiffened, his face flushing red. "Yes, Mr. Mercer. I apologize. I was just escorting him out." "Don't apologize. Just do your job," Julian snapped. He turned to one of his junior executives, completely ignoring Arthur now. "And regarding the West Side residential block, I don't care if those tenants are claiming hardship. I issued eviction notices today. The land is worth 3 times as much empty. Clear them out by the end of the month. I'll find someone who can." Arthur's blood ran cold. The West Side residential block was a subsidized housing project Sterling Ascendant had maintained for 2 decades. A personal initiative, Arthur had started to protect low-income families, aggressive gentrification. Hearing this arrogant, ruthless upstart casualty Arthur's on its cax mice on his wooden cane tighten until his knuckles turned white. "You shouldn't throw people out of their homes just to pad a quarterly report," Arthur said quietly. The lobby seemed to freeze. Julian slowly turned around, his eyes widening in sheer disbelief that the old man had dared to speak to him. "Excuse me," Julian whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "Did you just speak to me?" "A company as strong as foundation," Arthur replied, meeting Julian's furious gaze with a calm, piercing blue stare. "You crack the foundation to sell the gravel. Eventually, the whole tower falls." For a split second, Julian looked unnerved by the absolute authority in the old man's eyes. But the moment passed, replaced by a cruel sneer. "Get this psychotic old fool out of my sight. Now." Julian spun on his heel and swiped his black key card. stepping into executive elevators as the doors closed securely behind him. Davis grabbed Arthur's arm, not gently, but not without malice either. "Come on, old man. You brought this on yours. Let's go." Arthur didn't resist. He allowed Davis to guide him away from the main elevators, shuffling toward the grand revolving doors at the entrance. But just as they passed a set of heavy, unmarked oak doors labeled Mechanical Room 4, Arthur casually twisted his arm, slipping out of the guard's grip with surprising agility. Before Davis could react, Arthur leaned against the oak door, his thumb pressing perfectly, disguised as a metric scanner, disguised as a decorated brass rivet. The heavy door soft and swung open. "Hey, you can't go in there," Davis yelled, lunging forward. Arthur stepped in the dark alcove and looked back at the guard. "Have a good day, Davis," he said, his voice completely devoid of its previous frailty. The oak door pulled shut with a heavy, magnetic thud, locking from the inside. Arthur stood in the dimly lit, paneled private elevator, a lift known only to the original architect and the true owner of Sterling Ascendant. He pressed the thing's unnumbered button on the control panel, and the elevator began its silent, rapid ascent to the 60th floor. The private elevators ascended with a breathless, frictionless speed that made Arthur's ears pop. As the floor numbers on the data display climbed higher, the hunched, frail posture of the old man vanished entirely. Arthur squared his shoulders, his spine straightening in the commanding posture of a man. "I idolized her from nothing." He gripped the wooden cane not for support, but like a general holding a marshal's baton. With a soft chime, the doors parted, revealing a dimly lit, narrow corridor paneled in dark walnut. This was the architectural secret of the 60th floor, a private hallway designed solely for the founder, running directly behind the walls and the leading executive boardroom, and leading into his personal, locked study. Arthur walked down the carpeted hall, his footsteps entirely absorbed by the plush wool. He reached the end of the corridor and pressed his palm against a seamless wooden panel. Biometric sensors hummed, and the heavy door clicked open, granting him entry into a massive, dust-draped office. It had been untouched since he had announced his indefinite medical sabbatical 3 months ago. The board thought he resting at his estate in the Hamptons. They had no idea he'd spent the last 2 weeks wandering the city streets, testing the very foundation of the company he had spent 50 years building. He walked over to his massive mahogany desk and reached underneath, pressing said toggle switch. Instantly, a subtle crackle of static came through a hidden speaker built in the desk's leather inlay. It was a one-way audio feed connected directly to the central boardroom next door. Arthur sank into his high-backed leather chair and listened in the silence of his empty office. Completely unacceptable, a smooth, arrogant voice through the speaker. It was Julian Mercer. "We are leaving millions on the table out of sheer sentimentality." "I agree," a Julian voice replied. Arthur's heart sank, a heavy, cold weight dropping into his stomach. He knew that voice timidly. It was Richard, his older brother's son, and the man Arthur had personally appointed as interim CEO. Arthur had treated Richard like his own flesh and blood, mentoring him, paying for his Ivy League education, and guiding his career. Uncle Arthur's charitable initiatives were quaint in the 90s, Richard continued, his tone dripping with condescension. But the West Side residential block sits on prime commercial real estate. We are operating a charity for low-income losers. While our competitors are building luxury high, it stops today. I've already ordered the property management to issue the evictions, Julian said smoothly. We'll clear building by the 30th. The tenants won't have the legal resource to fight back. By the time your uncle returns his little vacation, the demolition crews will have already leveled the block. He'll be furious. But the board will back you once they see the projectiles from us, the new development adds. Make sure the evictions are merciless, Richard ordered coldly. No extensions. No exceptions. If they can't pay the newly hiked penalties, lock the doors. I want that building empty. In his dark office, Arthur closed his eyes. The betrayal stung more fiercely than the bitter Chicago wind outside. His own nephew was systematically his legacy of community support, turning Sterling Ascendant to a misfueled entirely by greed. Then, a sudden, horrified realization struck him. West Side residential block. Arthur remembered the agonizing, muffled phone call he had overheard in the cafe just 30 minutes earlier. Clara, the exhausted young woman who had bought him breakfast when he was dressed in rags, had been begging her landlord for a 3-day extension to pay her rent. She had mentioned her little brother's asthma medication. The puzzle pieces snapped into a devastating picture. The cafe manager had said Clara's wages were tight, and now she was facing immediate eviction. Clara lived in the West Side block. Julian and Richard weren't just Arthur's legacy, they were destroying the life of only person in this high beating who had shown him an ounce of humanity. Arthur's eyes snapped open, the sorrow entirely replaced by a terrifying ice rage. He stood up, walking over to a magnificent oil painting of the Chicago sky hanging on the wall. He gripped the edge of the heavy frame and pulled it forward, revealing a high-security titanium wall safe. He spun the dial with practiced precision, the heavy bolts sliding back with a solid clunk. Inside sat a stack of legal documents, a velvet box, and a sleek, fully encrypted Brack smartphone. Arthur took the phone and powered it on. It found a signal instantly. He dialed a single, unlisted number. It rang only once before a deep, calm voice answered. Sir, we eyes on the lobby. We lost you on the cameras after the altercation with Julian Mercer. I'm in my study. Marcus, Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. The rot is at the very top, is orchestrating the West Side demolitions with Mercer. Understood, sir, Marcus replied, his tone shifting into absolute professionalism. What your orders? Keep the escalade of sight, Arthur commanded. Looking through the glass walls of his office at the sprawling city below. And Marcus. I'm in the lobby Claire on a young and Claire, working in Kouro Cafe. Find out exactly where she lives, and buy the debt of her building by tomorrow morning. I want to know everything about her. Arthur hung up the phone, slipped it in the deep pocket of his tattered coat. The disguise wasn't coming off yet. In fact, the real test was only just beginning. The digital clock in the sterile employee break room flashed 6:15 p.m. Clara untied her green apron with aching, sluggish fingers, her feet throbbing from 10 hours of standing on hard tile. The evening rush had been relentless, a blur of impatient executives demanding complicated laps. As she reached for her coat, the break room door swung open. Brenda stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tight against her burgundy blazer, looking immensely satisfied. I'm docking your pay for this week, Clara Brenda said, her voice sharp and devoid of any empathy. I reviewed the register tape. The cost of the coffee and pastry you gave to that vagrant this morning will be deducted, along with a $50 penalty for violating our anti-loitering policy. Clara froze, her hand hovering over her thin winter coat. $50 was a fortune to her right now. It was half the cost of an inhaler. Brenda, please, she whispered, her voice tight. You can take the cost of the food, but the penalty. I can't afford that this week. I just can't. Then you should have thought about that for turning Cafe into charity ward. Brenda snapped, turning on her heel. Clock out. And if you late tomorrow, don't bother showing up. Clara closed her eyes, swallowing the hard, bitter lump in her throat. She couldn't afford to cry. She grabbed her bag and walked out the back exit, stepping in the oppressive chill of the Chicago evening. A block away, by the deep shadows of a concrete parking structure, Arthur watched her leave. He was back in his threadbare coat, his expensive watch safely tucked away, leaning on his wooden cane. The bitter wind gnawed at his bones, but a different kind of cold had settled in his chest, a cold, calculating fury. He had spent the afternoon pulling financial records from his secure terminal, unraveling the web of deceit Richard and Julian had woven. Now, he needed to see the human cost of their ambition. Arthur followed Clara at a discreet distance, a brack earpiece hidden beneath his thick, messy gray hair, immaculately to Marcus in the trailing Escalade. Clara walked 6 blocks to the Le train station, her head down against the wind. Arthur watched as she boarded a crowded, rattling train car. Despite her visible exhaustion, when a pregnant woman boarded 2 stops later, Clara immediately stood up, offered a seat with a tired but genuine smile. Arthur held onto metal pole a few yards away, observing her quiet grace. The contrast between this struggling girl and his privileged, Ivy League-educated nephew made him sick to his stomach. 40 minutes later, they arrived at the West Side residential block. Arthur stood on the cracked sidewalk, looking up at the 6-story brick building. It was one of his properties, but it entirely unfamiliar. The streetlights flickered erratically. The front security door hung off its hinges, and the intercom panel had been smashed. Fart had explicitly established a maintenance fund for this building a decade ago, entrusting Richard to oversee it. It was violently clear that not a single cent had been spent here in years. He watched Claire disappear in the dimly lit stairwell and slowly followed, his cane tapping quietly against the chipped concrete stairs. He stayed 1 floor behind her, pacing his breath. When Claire reached the 4th floor landing, she stopped dead in her tracks. Arthur paused in the shadows of the stairwell, peering through the rusted iron banister. Claire was standing frozen in front of Unit 4B. Taped to the center of her door was a bright, glaring orange piece of paper. It was a formal notice to vacate, stamped with the intimidating, embossed logo of Sterling Ascendant. Claire reached out with trembling hands and peeled the paper off the door. The bureaucrat cruelty of the document was absolute, immediate eviction. 48 hours to vacate. Failure to comply will result in a lock, out by property management. The silence in the hallway was shattered by a muffled, heartbreaking sob. Clara sank against the peeling wallpaper, sliding down to the dirty linoleum floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, the orange paper crushed in her fist, and wept into her hands. It was the desperate, quiet crying of someone who had finally hit the absolute bottom and had nothing left to give. Arthur felt a tightness in his throat that he hadn't experienced since his wife passed away. He took a half step forward, desperate to comfort her, to tell her that the paper meant nothing, that he owned the building and she was safe. But before he could step out of the shadows, his hidden earpiece chimed softly. "Sir," Marcus' voice crackled, strictly professional, but edged with urgency. "I've purchased the debt on the building, as you asked. But I just pulled the medical records. Oz, Clara, brother. There's a major complication. It isn't just severe asthma." Arthur froze, his hand gripping the banister. "What is it?" "Marcus," he whispered. "The boy needs surgery, sir. By the end of the week, or he isn't going to make it." "Surgery," Arthur breathed, the word barely audible over rattling building. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied through the hidden earpiece. "A specialized cardiac valve repair. It's scheduled, but the hospital requires a massive copay up front. Without it, they'll postpone indefinitely." And the boy's physician noted he once survived a delay. Arthur leaned heavily against the rusted banister, his heart hammering fiercely against his ribs. He had built hospitals, funded entire pediatric wings, and yet a child was suffocating in one of his own buildings because of corporate greed. Suddenly, Arthur's worn leather shoe slipped on the cracked concrete stair. His wooden cane clattered loudly against the iron railing, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet, empty stairwell. Clara jumped, the crumpled eviction notice dropping from her hand. She hastily wiped her tears with the frayed sleeves of her coat and leaned over the railing, her eyes searching the dim stairwell. "Hello, is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Arthur realized he had no choice. He slowly shuffled up the remaining steps, keeping his head low, the exhausted vagrant. As he stepped in the flickering yellow light of the landing, Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "You," she breathed. "The man from the cafe. What are you doing here?" Arthur kept his hands shaking, leaning heavily on his cane. I'm sorry to frighten you, miss. The wind was so bitter tonight. I saw you walking from the train. I hoped there might be a warm boiler room, a basement, in this building, where I could sleep. I didn't mean to intrude." Clara looked at him, then down at the bright orange notice to vacate on the floor. Most people, facing the loss of their home and the crushing weight of a sick sibling, would have screamed. They would have lashed out at the unfairness of the universe, demanding to know why a stolid man had followed them. Instead, Clara let out a long, exhausted sigh and bent down to pick up the notice, folding it neatly into her pocket. "There's no boiler room," Clara said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. "And the basement flooded 2 years ago. But you can't stay out in the freezing hallway." She unlocked Unit 4B and pushed the heavy wooden door open. "Come inside. I can make you some hot tea." Arthur stepped into the apartment. It was painfully small and drafty, the windows sealed with cheap plastic wrap to fight the brutal Chicago winter. Yet, it was impeccably clean. The few pieces of messed furniture were arranged neat, and a small, potted fern sat on the windowsill, stubbornly clinging to life in the gloom. From the corner of the room came a harsh, rattling cough, followed by the mechanical, rhythmic wheeze of an old, battered nebulizer machine. Arthur turned to see a young boy, no older than 9, lying on a faded sofa under a pile of thin, patchwork blankets. The child's skin was alarmingly pale, his lips carrying a faint, unhealthy blue tint. Despite his frail state, the boy pulled the plastic mask away from his face and offered Arthur a weak, curious smile. Leo, this is. Clara paused, realized she didn't even know his name. Arthur, he provided gently, keeping his power surname locked away. This is Arthur, Clara finished, taking his ragged coat and draping it over a wooden chair. He's going to have some tea warm up. Hi, Arthas rasped, his voice thin and airy. I'd shake your hand, but my chest hurts a lot today. That's quite all right, young man, Arthur said, taking a seat at the small laminate kitchen table. You just focus on resting your lungs. As Clara set ceiling kettle on the ancient electric stove, Arthur watched her carefully. You have a heavy burden on your shoulders. That Clara. I saw the paper on your door. You shouldn't be worried about an old man like me when your own roof is caving in. Clara's shoulders tightened. She poured the boiling water into 2 chipped ceramic mugs. My grandfather used to say that when the world is cruel, you don't fight it with more cruelty. You fight it by keeping your door open. She brought the tea to the table and sat across from him. Under the dim kitchen light, her brave facade finally cracked. Her voice dropped to a devastated whisper so Leo wouldn't hear. That paper means we're out in 48 hours, she confessed, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I had the money for Leo's surgery down payment saved up. Every single penny. But last month, the property management tripled our rent retroactively. They said it was a new corporate mandate. I had to choose between keeping a roof over his head or paying the hospital. I thought I could buy enough time to figure it out. Arthur felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hatred for his nephew. Richard's greed hadn't just displaced families, it was actively destroying them. What hospital? Clara, Arthur asked, his voice suddenly steady, dropping the frail act for just a fraction of a second. Stomp. Jude's, she whispered, looking down at her teeth. The surgery is supposed to be this Friday. If he doesn't get it, she choked back a sob, unable to finish the agonizing sentence. Arthur took a slow sip of the cheap tea, hiding the fears, calculating fire in his eyes. So Friday. He had exact 3 days to dismantle Richard's entire operation, save this little boy, and bring Sterling Ascendant back from the brink of moral bankruptcy. Arthur carefully his empty ceramic mug on the small laminate table. The cheap tea had warmed his hands, but the fierce, protective fire burning in his chest was what truly drove the cold away. He looked across the dim room at lit Leo, whose chest rose and fell with a labored, painful rhythm, and then at Clara, who was staring blankly at the wall, crushed under the weight of impossible deadline. I should go, Arthur said softly, slowly pushing him up with his wooden cane. I've taken up enough of your evening, and young Leo needs to rest. Clara blinked, pulling her out of her quiet despair. Are you sure? I know it's freezing out there. I don't have a spare bed, but you're welcome to sleep on the armchair for the night. It's better than a park bench. Even now, facing the loss of her home and her brother's life, her instinct was to shelter a stranger. Arthur felt a profound tightness in his throat. Thank you, Clara. But I know a shelterway that will have a warm cot for me. Arthur lied smoothly, offering her a gentle, reassuring smile. Keep your faith. Sometimes, The darkest hour of the night comes just before the sun breaks over the horizon. Clara managed a sad, fragile smile. She walked over to a small coat rack near the door and pulled down a thick, charcoal gray knitted scarf. She stepped forward next, tucking the ends in his threadbare coat. "This was my grandmother's," she whispered. "He would have wanted you to have it. Stay warm, Arthur." Arthur touched the soft wool of the scarf, his eyes shining with genuine emotion. "I will treasure it. Good night, Clara." He stepped out, and in the freezing, his drafty hallway. The moment the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him, the frail, hunched posture of the vagrant vanished. Arthur stood tall, his jaw set like granite. He didn't use the cane, the concrete stairs, but stairs. His mind already operating at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He pushed through the broken front doors of the building and walked briskly down ice sidewalk. 2 blocks away, idling silently in the shadows of defunct warehouse, was the black Cadillac Escalade. As Arthur approached, the rear passenger door swung open. He climbed inside, immediately enveloped by the rich smell of premium leather and the blast as heavy-duty heating system. Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut and a tailored suit, turned around from the front seat. "Sir," Marcus quietly. "Drive," Arthur commanded. The Escalade glided seamlessly in the Chicago night. Arthur unbuttoned his ripped coat, but he left Clara's knitted scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. "Marcus, I want you to contact the chief at Jude's Medical Center immediately," Arthur said, his voice carrying the ruthless authority of a boardroom titan. "Tell them the Sterling Fountain is stepping in. I want Leo's surgery paid for in full by dawn. Cover all post-operative care. Private recovery rooms. The absolute best specialists they have. Do it anonymously if they ask any questions. Tell them their annual grant from my fountains depends on their absolute silence." "Done. Consider it, sir," Marcus said, tapping a swift sequence into a mounted tablet. "What about the eviction notices at the West Side block?" "Let them stand for now," Arthur replied, his blue eyes narrowing as he stared out the tinted window at the passing city lights. Marcus paused, glancing at Arthur in the rearview mirror. "Sir, you want the eviction to proceed." "I want Richard and Julian to think they have won," Arthur said coldly. "If I step in and cancel the eviction quietly, they will simply find another way to their corruption. I need them exposed. I want to pull them up by the roots." Arthur turned to look at Marcus. "What are they planning for Friday?" "Richard is hosting a major shareholder gala in the Sterling Ascendant Grand Ballroom," Marcus answered. "The event. He planned to publicly announce the of the West Side block, unveil the blueprints for the new luxury high-rise to the board of directors. He believes to secure his position as permanent CEO." A dark, dangerous smile touched the corners of Arthur's mouth. "A gala. How perfect. He intends to celebrate his victory, and a young woman is thrown out on the on the street." Arthur leaned back against the plush leather seat, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the soft yarn of Clara's scarf. "Let them prepare their grand announcement," Arthur murmured, his voice dropping to a low, icy whisper. "Let them put on their tuxedos and pour their champagne. On Friday night, I am going to walk into that ballroom, and I am going to burn Richard's empire to the ground." Wednesday morning arrived with a bitter, biting frost. But the cold was nothing compared to the absolute dread freezing Clara's veins. She walked through the tower glass doors of Sterling Ascendant, her limbs feeling like lead. She had barely slept a wink, spending the night listening to the terrifying, rattling breathing. With only 36 hours left until the Pineside apartment she was operating on pure, desperate adrenaline. She tied her green apron tightly around her waist, bracing hers for another grueling shift. Brenda was already pacing behind the espresso machines, shooting Clara a venomous glare, but Clara barely registered it. Her cheap cell phone, tucked away in her jeans pocket, vibrated against her hip. Clara froze. She pulled it out, her stomach dropping to the floor when she saw the caller ID sent Jude's Medical Center. Her hands shook violently as she ducked into the narrow employee break room. This was it. The billing department was calling to officially cancel deposit. Hello, Clara whispered, her voice cracking, tears already welling in her exhausted eyes. Please, I just need a little more time. I'm trying to get a loan. MS. Hayes, a gentle, professional voice, interrupted. This is Margaret from Patient Financial Services at St. Jude's. I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm calling with some incredibly good news. Clara leaned against the cool tile wall, unable to process the words. I don't understand. At 5 o'clock this morning, the hospital received a wire transfer from a private, anonymous philanthropic foundation, Margaret explained, her tone radiating warmth. Leo's surgery has been paid for in full, and not just the procedure, Mrs. by Hayes. The donor, all swapperted care, a private recovery suite, and out-of-pocket medication costs for the next 5 years. The break room seemed to spin. Clara's knees buckled, and she slid down the wall until she hit the floor. She clamped over her mouth to muffle a violent, full-body sob. The crushing, suffocating weight she had carried for months suddenly evaporated, leaving her gasping for air. Is this real? Clara wept, the tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Please tell me this isn't a mistake. It's very real, Margaret said softly. The surgery team is prepping everything for Friday morning. Also, the hospital administrations wants to offer you a complimentary family suite in the pediatric wing for the duration of his recovery. You can bring your belonging and move in tomorrow evening. It was a miracle. The timing was so flawless that as if a guardian of heavens, she wouldn't be on the street when the eviction lockout happened. She would be at the hospital, this safe, with her brother. The break room door violently swung open, slamming against the wall. Brenda stood there, her hands on her hips, her face twisted in a vicious sneer. I told you yesterday, Clara. No personal calls on company time, Brenda shrieked. You are already on thin ice. Get off the floor and get back to the register, or I am firing you right here, right now. Normally, the threat of losing her job would have sent Clara into a spiral of panic. But today, she just looked at Brenda through her tears and smiled. It was a radiant, luminous smile that completely disarmed the angry manager. Clara slowly stood up, wiping her face, a newfound strength radiating from her small frame. I'll be right out, Brenda, Clara said softly, her voice steady and completely devoid of fear. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and tied her back, ready to face the day. outside the cafe. Blending perfectly into the morning crowd in the lobby, Arthur leaned on his wooden cane. He adjusted the thick, charcoal gray scarf wrapped warmly around his neck through the hidden earpiece. Marcus' voice hummed discreetly. The hospital has confirmed contact with Clara. Sir, the boy is secured. They offer her the family suite as instructed. Excellent work. Marcus, Arthur murmured softly, his sharp blue eyes tracking Brenda as she barked orders behind the counter. Let's see how long these petty tyrants maintain their arrogance. Arthur turned away from the cafe and listened quietly to the hidden mechanical alcove. Use his biometric scan to access his private elevator once more. Minutes later, sitting in the dark silence of his hidden 60th floor study, Arthur flipped the toggle on his mahogany desk. The audio feed from the executive boardroom crackled to life. The sheriff's slick voice confirmed the schedule. Julian Mercer's slick voice echoed speakers. The West Side block will be entirely locked down and boarded up by 8 o'clock Friday morning. Anyone left inside will be physically removed. Perfect, Richard replied, his tone dripping with self-satisfaction. And the gala preparations. Everything is flawless. The champagne is imported. The press is invited. And the board is eager to see your vision. Julian laughed. By Friday night, Arthur's pathetic little charity project will buy dust. And you will be the uncontested king of this company. In the shadows of his office, Arthur leaned forward, resting his chin on his steepled hands. His eyes gleamed with a terrifying calm. Enjoy the crown, Richard, Arthur whispered to the empty room, because on Friday, I am taking off your head. Thursday evening descended on Chicago with a heavy, freezing rain, turning the streets into slick black mirrors, reflecting the city's ambient glow. Inside Unit 4B of the West Side residential block, the sharp sound of a zipper closing felt like the final punctuation mark on a long, exhausted life. She packed the last of Leo's clothes into a worn canvas duffel bag. The apartment was already cold, the radiators having been set up properly prior to freeze the remaining essence out. But for the first time in months, Clara didn't feel the chill. She wrapped a thick blanket around her brother's shoulders, her heart overflowing with profound relief. They were leaving for St. Jude's Medical Center tonight. Ready to go, buddy, Clara asked softly, brushing a stray lock hair from Leo's pale forehead. Yeah, Leo wheezed, clutching a small stuffed bear. Will it be warm at the hospital? Very warm, she promised, hoisting the heavy bag over her shoulder. And you're going to get better. I promise. They stepped out in the dim hallway, the silence of the building eerie and oppressive. Most of the families had already fled, terrified by the ruthless eviction notices and the escalating late fees. As Claire and Lyle made their way down the concrete stairwell, the muffled sounds and argument echoed up from the ground floor lobby. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, Clara stopped, pacing the lobby, and a man in a cheap pince, holding a two beefy private security guards stood behind him. His name tag read Vance, and he was Julian Mercer's lead enforcer for property management. Vance was currently yelling at an elder couple who were struggling to carry their boxes out the door. He turned, his locking into Clara and her duffel bag. A nasty, triumphant grin spread across his face. Well, leaving early. Hayes, Vance sneered, stepping into her path. Good. Leave the keys on the radiator. And just so you know, We'll be keeping the secure deposit for the deep cleaning fees. Clara tightened her grip on Leo's hand. She didn't have the energy to fight. Fine. Take it. Just let us pass. Vance didn't move. He eyed the heavy canvas bag on her shoulder. Actually, your newly accumulated penalties exceed the deposit, Mr. Mercer left strict instructions. We have corporate authorization to seize abandoned property to cover the outstanding balance. He nodded to one of the guards, who took a threatened step forward toward Clara's bag. Leave her alone. The voice was quiet, but it cut through the damp air of the lobby like a straight razor. Arthur stepped out from the deep vestibule. He was wearing his frayed coat, leaning on his wooden cane, with Clara's thick, charcoal gray scarf wrapped securely around his neck. Vance looked the old man up and down and let out a harsh bark of laughter. Who the hell are you? The building mascot. Back off, Grandpa, before you get hurt. Arthur didn't flinch. He fixed Vance with a stare so intensely cold it consciously take a half step back. The eviction notice on her door explicitly states the deadline is 8 a.m. on Friday, Arthur said, his voice dropping its raspy frailty, echoing with an undeniable, terrifying authority. Seizing her personal belongings tonight, without a court-appointed bailiff present, constitute theft and extortion. Touch that bag, and you will spend the rest of this freezing night in a holding cell. Vance flushed red, his ego bruised in front of his hired muscle. Listen to the street lawyer, he spat. He lunged forward, shoving Arthur hard in the chest. Arthur stumbled backward, his cheap shoes sliding on the wet linoleum. He caught his heavily on his cane, gasping slightly as a jolt of pain shot up his arm. In the darkness outside the glass doors, the towering silhouette of Marcus took a sudden, violent step forward. But Arthur imperceptibly held up a single finger behind his back. Stand down. Don't you dare touch him, Clara screamed. She's dropped her bag and rushed to put her between Arthur and the security guards, shielding the old man with her own body. She glared at Vance with a fierce, untamed fury. We are leaving. Right now. If you try to stop us, I will scream till the police arrive. Vance scowled, adjusting his lapels. He decided it wasn't worth the hassle. What? Get out. Then, enjoy the streets. It's trash. Clara grabbed her bag, kept Leo close, and gently guided Arthur out the door into the freezing rain. Under the flickering street lamp, she turned to him, her eyes wide with worry. Arthur, you shouldn't have done that. He could have really hurt you, she scolded gently, checking him for injuries. Bullies only have power when everyone bows their heads to them. Clara, Arthur smiled, leaning on his cane. He looked down at Leo. You two need to get out of the rain. As if on cue, a pristine yellow taxi pulled up to the curb, summoned discreetly by Marcus from a block away. We're going to the hospital, Clara said quickly. They have family room for us. Please. Arthur, come with us. You can sit in the waiting room where it's safe and warm. You can't stay out here. Arthur felt a profound warmth bloom in his chest. Even now, she was trying to save him. Thank you, my dear. But I will be perfect fine. I have a very important appointment tomorrow. A family matter I need to resolve. Clara hesitated, but Leo's coughing urged her in the cab. Promise me you'll stay safe. I promise, Arthur said softly. He watched the taxi pull away, its taillights disappearing into the rainy Chicago night. He stood alone on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the freezing rain hit his face. Then, an oversized black umbrella appeared over his head. Marcus stepped up beside him, his jaw clenched tight in restrained anger. Vance, the property manager, Arthur murmured, never taking his eyes off the spot where the taxi had vanished. Add his determination list for tomorrow night. With pleasure, sir, Marcus growled softly. Tomorrow is Friday. The grand ballroom at Sterling Ascendant is fully prepped for the gala. Arthur slowly turned around, looking up at the distant, glittering sky where his 60-story skyscraper pierced the clouds. The vagrant disguise was no longer needed. The reconnaissance was over. Let's go home, Marcus, Arthur commanded, his voice ringing with absolute clarity. I need to pick out a tuxedo. It's time to attend a party. Friday morning broke over Chicago with a crisp, brilliant sunlight that chased away the lingering storm. But inside the VIP wing of St. Jude's Medical Center, Clara was already bathed in a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She sat on the edge of a plush, leather recliner in a private and a hospital that looked more like a 5-star hotel room than a hospital. A basket of fresh fruit and a carafe of high-end coffee rested on the mahogany side table. Down the hall, in a state-of-the-art operating theater, the city's top cardiothoracic surgeons was repairing her little brother's heart. A gentle knock broke the quiet hum of the room, and Margaret, the financial liaisons she had spoken to on the phone, stepped inside with a reassuring smile. The surgical team just checked in. Menzies. Hayes, Margaret said softly. Leo is doing wonderfully. The procedure is going exactly as planned. Claire exhaled a shaky breath, pressing her hands to her face as a fresh wave of tears threatened to spill. Thank you. I still can't believe this is happening. Can please tell me who did this? The foundation. I want to write them a letter. I need them to know they saved my family. Margaret's smile turned slight apologetic. I'm afraid the donor insists on absolute anonymity. Sigh, sweetheart. The Sterling Foundation operates at the highest levels of corporate philanthropy. The direct to us were crystal clear. You and Leo are to be treated like royalty, and they will handle every single expense. All you need to do is focus on your brother. Clara looked out the large window of her suite, gazing at the distant, towering silhouette of the Sterling Ascendant skyscraper piercing the morning sky. She couldn't fathom what a massive corporate entity had to do with her, but as she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, she couldn't shake the memory of the frail, kind old man she had left out in the cold the night before. She hoped Arthur was safe. Miles away, the very top of that towering skyscraper, the atmosphere was thick with arrogant celebration. Richard paced the perimeter of the executive boardroom on the 60th floor, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand, despite it barely being noon. He looked down at the sprawling city, a smug grin plastered across his face. On the massive mahogany table behind him sat a beautiful, illuminated architectural model of a sleek luxury high-rise, the exact building that would soon replace the West Side residential block. The heavy boardroom doors swung open, and Julian Mercer strode in, looking impeccably sharp in a tailored navy suit. It's done, Julian announced, pouring him a drink from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. Vance just called from the site. The West Side block, entirely vacant. The sheriff's orders at our size. Sharp. 8 o'clock. The property is boarded up. The power is severed. and the demolition permits are officially stamped. Richard raised his glass in a mock toast. To progress. Julian. Tonight. That eerid, bleeding heart sentimentality is dead and buried. By the time the old man finishes his litty office and comes back to the office, the bulldozers will already broken ground. He won't have a choice but to accept it. The grand ballroom is ready for the gala tonight, Julian added, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. The press is setting up their cameras, and the champagne is on ice. Tonight, Richard, you become the undisputed king of Sterling Ascendant. They clinked their heavy crystal glasses together. Complete gathering for the hurricane just outside their doors. On the other side of the city, inside a heavily guarded, palatial penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the vagrant was dead. Arthur sat perfectly still in a velvet armchair as a master barber carefully drew a straight razor across his jawline. The scruffy, unkempt gray beard fell away, revealing the sharp, patrician features and granite jaw of a billionaire titan. As the barber away the remaining shaving cream with a hot towel, Arthur opened his eyes. The pale blue irises no longer held the weary frailty of an old man begging for change. They were absolute ice. Stood up, stepping into his dressing room. His valet helped him a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, the midnight black fabric draping flawlessly over his shoulders. Arthur buttoned the crisp white shirt and adjusted his silk bow tie with practiced precision. He reached into velvet jewelry box on his dresser and pulled out the A. Lang & Son platinum watch. He strapped it to his wrist. The heavy, mechanical ticking, a rhythmic reminder that time had finally run out for his enemies. Marcus stepped in the doorway, dressed in a sharp black suit, an earpiece discreetly tucked into his ear. The motorcade is standing by. Sir. Thus, the board members are currently arriving at the grand ballroom for the cocktail hour. Richard is scheduled to make a speech at 8 o'clock. Perfect, Arthur murmured. He turned toward the door, but paused. Sitting on a velvet bench next to the discarded, mothball, scented trench coat was the cheap, charcoal green scarf Claire had wrapped around his neck. Arthur picked it up, to his valet's immense confusion. The billionaire draped the worn, slightly frayed scarf over lapels of his $1,000 tuxedo, tucking it neatly under his collar. The valet asked hesitantly, "Does that go with the attire?" "It's the most valuable thing I am wearing tonight," Arthur said softly, feeling the rough yarn against his neck. He turned to Marcus, his eyes blazing. The electric sensations. Let's go crash a party. The Sterling Ascendant Grand Ballroom was a cathedral of modern opulence, draped in shimmering gold silk and illuminated by massive crystal chandeliers that fractured the light into a million dazzling pieces. A live jazz quartet played softly in the corner, their notes with the ambient hum of privilege, the clinking of imported champagne flutes, and the low, confident chatter of Chicago's elite. At the center of it all stood Richard, glowing with an intoxicating mix of arrogance and triumph. He wore a custom midnight blue tuxedo and held court among the board of directors, shaking hands and accepting premature congratulations. Beside him was Lawless playing the role of the loyal lieutenant, directing investors' glasses and ensuring the wealthy Zaz were never empty. Casually checked the heavy gold Rolex on his wrist. It was 5 minutes to 8. His moment had finally arrived. Meanwhile, 60 floors below, sets the quiet evening lobbies, abrupt Brett, shattered. a motorcade of 4 black Cadillac Escalades glide in the VIP circular driveway, their headlights piercing the glass facade of the building. The heavy doors opened in perfect synchronization. A dozen men in sharp black suits stepped out, forming a protective perimeter. Marcus emerged from the Lee vehicle and pulled open the rear door of the central Laz. Arthur stepped out on the polished granite curb. He didn't look like an old man returning from a medical sabbatical, nor did he look like the frail vagrant who had been pushed to the floor days ago. The king returning to reclaim a usurped throne. The bespoke tuxedo draped his broad shoulders perfectly, but it was the cheap, charcoal gray knitted scarf tucked neatly under his collar that drew the eye. It was a stark, jarring contrast to the immense wealth he projected, a silent banner of the promise he had made. Arthur walked through the revolving glass doors, his security falling into flawless V-formation behind him. His cane was gone. He walked with a smooth, powerful stride, his leather shoes clicking against the Italian marble with terrifying authority. At the central security desk, Veit Davis, the burly guard who had roughly handled Arthur just days before, was monitoring the monitors. He saw the entourage approaching and immediately stood up, puffing out his chest to the gala's strict guest list. "Excuse me, gentlemen. This building is closed for a private." Davis froze. The words died in his throat as the older foreman at the front of the foremen's stepped into the harsh lobby light. Davis recognized the sharp, patrician features from the massive oil painting hanging in the corporate boardroom, but he also recognized the pale, piercing blue eyes of the homeless man he had threatened to arrest. The Yezi hit him like a physical blow, draining every ounce of color from his face. Arthur paused, locking eyes with the trembling guard. "Good evening, Davis," Arthur said, his voice smooth as glass but heavy with lethal implication. "I trust there will be no need to physically escort me out of my own building tonight." "I, Sterling," Davis stammered, stepping back so fast he knocked over his own chair. I didn't know." "Sir, fight, please." Arthur didn't wait for the apology. Yike Kintate continued the VI elevator banks, the exact same elevators Julian Mercer had banished him from. Marcus swiped a master key card, and the polished silver doors slid open instantly. As the elevator ascended silently toward the 60th floor, the atmosphere in the grand ballroom was reaching a crescendo. Richard stepped up to the acrylic podium, tapping his crystal champagne flute with a silver spoon. The sharp, clear ringing sound instant silenced the room. The jazz quartets stopped playing. 200 of the most power people of the city turned their attention to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the board," Richard began, his voice amplified flawlessly through the state-of-art sound system. He offered a charming, practiced smile. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate the future. For 50 years, my uncle, Arthur Sterling, built this company into a titan of industry. But as we look ahead to a new decade, we must acknowledge that a company cannot survive on outdated sentimentality." Julian Mercer stood near the front row, nodding in solemn agreement, though his eyes greed. "Tonight, I am proud to announce that we are trimming the fat," Richard declared, his voice rising with theatrical passion. "As of this morning, the derelict West Side residential block has been completely vacated. The bulldozers are fueled and ready. In its place, we will build the crown jewel of Chicago real estate." He gestured to the massive table beside him. Julian stepped forward, a black velvet drape, revealing a stunning, illuminated architectural model of a sleek, glass and steel tower. The room erupted into enthusiastic applause. Out with the old, Richard smiled warmly, raising his glass to the crowd, and in with the new. At the exact moment the applause reached its peak, the massive, 12-foot tall oak doors at the back of the ballroom were violently pushed open. The heavy thud echoed like a cannon shot. Instant, the applause. The room plunged into breathless, shocked silence as 200 heads turned toward the entrance. Standing in the threshold, flanked by a wall of men in black suits, was Arthur Sterling. The silence in the grand ballroom was so absolute that the mechanical ticking of Arthur's Lang Sohn's watch sounded like a metron counting down to an execution. The crystal champagne flutes stopped halfway to the guest's mouth. The board members, wealthy investors, and socialites stood frozen, their eyes locked on the massive oak doors. On stage, Richard's charming, practiced smile melted off his face, replaced by a sickly, chalky, white pallor. The glass of imported scotch slipped from his trembling fingers, hitting the 100 by pieces, and shattering a glittering pieces. Arthur walked slowly down the center aisle, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He didn't look at the billionaires, the politicians, or the flashing cameras of the local press. His pale blue eyes were locked tirely on his nephew, the cheap, charcoal gray knitted scarf tucked beneath the lapels, his Tom Ford toque confused. Hushed whispers from the elite crowd, but Arthur wore it like a suit of armor forged in undeniable truth. Uncle Arthur, Richard choked out, his voice cracking violently over the microphone. He scrambled to recover, forcing a frantic, desperate smile as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. We didn't expect you back from your medical sabbatical so soon. That, ladies and gentlemen, the founder himself. Please, give him a warm welcome. No one clapped. The terrified gravity radiating from Arthur anchored every hand in the room. Arthur stepped up the small stairs onto the stage. He took the acrylic podium. He simply walked over to the illuminated architectural model of the new luxury high-rise. He stared at it for a long, heavy moment before turning his gaze back to Richard. You spoke of trimming the fat, Richard, Arthur said quietly. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried a raw, commanding tower that filled the cavernous room. You spoke of discarding outdated sentimentality. Julian Mercer, desperate to salvage the most important night of his career, stepped. He completely failed to read the lethal atmospheres in the room, flashing his slick, corporate smile. Mr. Sterling. Sir, it's a profound honor. Richard and I were just unveiled the new vision for the West Side property. A vision that will triple quarterly profits and modernize your legacy. Arthur slowly turned his head to look at the Vice President of Operations. He studied Julian's tailored navy suit, perfectly slick hair, and expensive leather shoes. Is that right, Mr. Mercer? Arthur asked, his voice dropping an octave, echoing with an terrifying calm. Tell me, are those profits worth a lobby cafe into soup kitchen? Julian froze. His confident smile faltered, his brow furrowing in utter confusion. Sir, I don't understand. Are they worth kicking a quarter under a pastry display case? Arthur continued, taking a slow step toward the younger executive. Are they worth stepping over a trembling old man in a threadbare coat, complaining that his scent might ruin your morning? Julian stopped breathing. His eyes darted frantically from Arthur's sharp, patrician features down to the worn, charcoal gray scarf rests against the tuxedo shirt. And then, the devastating truth slammed into him with the force of a freight train. He remembered the raspy voice. He remembered the piercing blue eyes. The beggar he had insulted, war kicked, and ordered security to throw out into the freezing wind, was the billionaire who owned the very ground he was standing on. Julian staggered backward as if he had been physics struck, his impeccable posture collapsing into pure, that trembling terror. "It," Julian whispered, the blood draining from his face until he looked like a ghost. "In the lobby, you were the old man." A man's true character is revealed by how treaties are beneath him, Arthur said softly, though the words cut like a straight razor. "You failed the test, Julian, spectacularly." Well, Arthur dismissed the tremblings executed with a look of pure disgust and turned back to his nephew. "And you," thought Richard, "I trusted as my life's work, with our family's legacy," Arthur said, the deep hardening into yielding, unye fury, instead of building upon it. "You chose to tear down the very people this company was founded to protect. You ordered the merciless eviction of struggling families in the bitter cold. You prioritized an architectural model over a dying child's breath." "Uncle, it's just business," Richard pleaded, panic raising the pitch of his voice. He looked desperately at the silent board of directors for support, but they were motionless, recognizing a slaughter when they saw one. "The West Side block is a massive liability. I was saving the company millions." "You were saving nothing," Arthur declared, his tone absolute. He raised a hand, and Marcus stepped up to the stage, handing Arthur a thick, red leather folder. Arthur tossed it onto the stage, letting it slide to a stop at Richard's expensive shoes. "I spent last to Sully, saying, and offshore accounts, Richard. The illegal kickbacks from the demolition crews. The shell companies you set up to purchase the West Side land at a fraction of its value. You weren't trimming the fat. You were butchering my company to line your own pockets." A collective gasp erupted from the board members in the front row. The press cameras, which had been paralyzed by the tension, suddenly erupted into a blinding, rapid firecado of flashes. Richard looked down at the red folder, his knees visibly shaking. The empire he thought he had stolen was collapsing in a matter of a second. Arthur stepped forward, grabbing the edge of the podium. As of this exact moment, the billionaire announced to the entire room, "This gala is over, and so are you." The blinding staccato of camera flashes snapped the room out of its paralyzed silence. The local press sensed the corporate scandal of the decade. This surged forward, their lenses trained on Richard's crumbling facade. Richard dropped to his knees, his tremulous papers high, spilling from the red folder. The offshore account numbers, the forged demolition permits, the illegal wire transfers. It was an airtight, undeniable ledger of his treason. He looked up at Arthur, tears of genuine panic streaming down his face. "Uncle Arthur, please," Richard begged, abandoning any pretense of dignity as the camera captured his every sob. "I can fix this. I can. The money. We are blood. You can't do this to your own family." Arthur looked down at the man he had practically raised. There was no rage left in his pale blue eyes, only a profound, freezing disappointment. "Family protects one another, Richard," Arthur said, his voice steady and quiet, yet carrying to the furthest corners of the grand ballroom. "Family does not throw sick children on the street in the dead of winter to inflate a courtly margin. You strip this company of its soul. You are no longer CO. You are no longer on the board. And as of tomorrow morning, when my lawyers hand this folder over to the district attorney, you be facing federal embezzlement charges." Richard collapsed back onto his heels, burying his face in his hands as a wretched sob tore from his throat. Julian Mercer, realizing the ship was sinking and taking him with it, took a desperate step toward Arthur. "Mr. This Sterling. Sir, you must understand. I was only following his directives. Richard authorized the evictions, not me. I've always been loyal to the company." Arthur slowly turned his gaze to the vice president of operations. Julian flinched, instinctively taking a step back. "Your loyalty is to your own vanity, Mr. Mercer," Arthur replied with a lethal calm. "A man who kicks his beggar of a warm cafe will not hesitate to kick his own company in the dirt. If it serves him, you are officially terminated. Your stock options are voided, and your severance is revoked for gross misconduct." Julian opened his mouth to argue, but the sheer gravity in Arthur's stare silenced him instantly. Arthur snapped his fingers. Marcus and a squad of 4 broad-shouldered security agents stepped forward, moving with silent, military precision. "Take their company phones and their key cards," Arthur commanded without looking at the 2 men. "Escort them out through the service elevator. I do not want them breathing in my lobby ever again." "No. Please. Let me explain," Julian shouted. But a security guard had already firmly gripped his elbow, marching him swiftly toward the rear exits. Richard didn't even fight. He was hoisted to his feet by 2 guards and practically dragged out of the ballroom. As his reign of greed came to an agonizing, humiliating end. With the 2 usurpers removed, the oppressive tensions in the room shifted. Arthur slowly turned to face the board of directors. The wealthiest men and women in Chicago stood rigidly, suddenly terrified that the billionaire's wrath would turn on them next. Arthur walked over to the illuminated, multi-million-dollar architectural model of the luxury high-rise. He reached out and simply pushed it off the table. The heavy acrylic and plastics shattered violently against the hardwood floor, the internal lights flickering out in an instant. "The West Side demolition is cancelled," Arthur announced, his tone leaving absolute no room for debate. "The properties will not be sold. Instead, they will undergo an immediate, top-tier renovation. We will transform them housing, the art-affordable housing, fully funded by the offshore my nephew so graciously left behind." He swept his gaze over the terrified board members. "If any of you that human decency is incompatible with corporate success, I suggest you tender your resignations by Monday morning, because as long as I am breathing, Sterling again profit from the suffering of the vulnerable. Quite us." A spontaneous, thunderous applause erupted from the back of the room, started by the press, and quickly joined by a few of the braver board members. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was clapping, the sheer magnitude of Arthur's moral the crowd, washing over the crowd. But Arthur wasn't interested in their applause. He had surgically removed the cancer from his empire. The job here was done. He stepped off the stage, walking briskly back down the center aisle. Marcus fell perfectly into step right behind him. They pushed through the heavy oak doors, leaving the stunned, reeling gala behind them. As they stepped in the private VIP elevator, the heavy steel doors sliding shut, the fierce, commanding aura of the billionaire softened. Arthur reached up, his fingers gently tracing the rough, worn yarn of the charcoal gray scarf around his neck. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded, replaced by a deep, pulling urgency in his chest. Marcus, Arthur asked softly, the imposing CEO replaced entirely by the concerned elder. What is the status of the surgery? I just spoke with the chief surgeon, sir, Marcus replied, a rare, genuine smile touching his stoic features. The seizure was a complete success. Young Leo is resting comfortably in the private recovery suite. His sister hasn't left his side. Arthur let out a long, shuddering breath of pure relief. He closed his eyes, feeling of the last 3 days finally lift from his shoulders. Bring the car around. Marcus, Arthur murmured as the elevator chimed at the ground floor. It's time I properly introduced myself to Clara. Saturday morning, sunlight flooded the grand lobby of Sterling Ascendant, casting a warm, golden glow over the imported Italian marble. The atmosphere was remarkably lighter, the oppressive tension of Julian and Richard's regime having vanished overnight. Inside the Kouro Cafe, the morning rush was just beginning. Brenda, the cafe manager, stood behind the espresso machines, barking orders at her terrified baristas. She had spent the entire morning obsessively refreshing the news on her phone, reading the sensation-dramatic return about Arthur Sterling's arrest of his nephew, the subsequent thus. Brenda was determined to ensure her cafe looked utter flawless today, just in case the legendary CEO decided to walk through the lobby. At exactly 8 o'clock, the heavy glass doors of the cafe swung open. A sudden hush fell over the morning crowd. Arthur Sterling walked in, flanked by the tower presence of Marcus. Arthur wore a tailored charcoal gray suit that radiated quiet, undeniable power. But resting against the lapels of the expensive wool was the frayed, faded knitted scarf he had worn for the last 3 days. Brenda's eyes widened in sheer, the starstruck awe. She frantically pushed a junior barista out of the way and rushed to the front register, smoothing down her burgundy blazer and plastering on her most sycophantic smile. Mr. Sterling, Brenda gushed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. It is an absolute honor, sir. We are so thrilled to have you back. What can I get for you this morning? Anything you want. Completely on the house. Arthur stopped at the counter. He didn't smile. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Brenda's name tag, then slowly drifted up to her face. I would like a small black coffee and a warm croissant, Arthur said, his voice smooth and calm. But I will pay for it. I believe I have an outstanding debt with this establishment. Brenda chuckled nervously, completely oblivious to the danger. A debt, sir. Oh, please. You own the building. Your money is no good here. Arthur reached in his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek, heavy tungsten black card. He placed it softly on the counter. I insist. I need to cover the breakfast that was generously purchased for me on Tuesday. Oh, and I believe I also society. Your anti-oring policy. The nervous smile on Brenda's face froze. The blood drained from her cheeks with the speed of a falling stone. She stared at the black card, then up at Arthur's sharp features, and finally, her eyes dropped to the frayed, charcoal gray scarf wrapped around his neck. The horrifying hit her so hard she physically staggered backward, knocking over a stack of paper cups. "You," Brenda gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "You were the man." "The vagrant," Arthur offered, his tone dropping an ice chill that froze the air in the cafe. "The human garbage you said was ruin your morning." "Yes, Brenda. That was me." Brenda began to tremble violently. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't know. I was just trying to uphold the building standards. Please, I swear I didn't mean." "You didn't know I was wealthy," Arthur interrupted quietly. "That is your only regret. You looked at a human being who was cold and hungry, and you saw only trash. And when a young woman with a heart full of grace tried to show me a sliver of kindness, you threatened her livelihood." Arthur picked up his BRAC card and slipped it back in his pocket. "You exactly 10 minutes to clear out your locker, Brenda. If you are still on my property at 8:15, Marcus will have you escorted out in handcuffs for trespassing. You are permanent terminated." Brenda opened her mouth to beg, but the absolute finality in Arthur's eyes silenced her. She broke into a humiliated break room and ran toward the back break room, her career in ruins. Arts turned to the stunned junior barista behind the counter, express softening into gentle, grandfatherly smile. "I'll just take that coffee and croissant to go. Why, please. Keep the change from this," he added. "Place a crisp $100 bill on the counter." 20 minutes later, Arthur walked down the quiet, carpeted hallway of the VIPDAC wing at St. Jude's Medical Center. Marcus carried the small paper bag from the cafe, staying a respectful distance behind. Arthur paused outside the door of the family suite, taking a deep breath before gently pushing it open. The inside. The room was bathed in soft morning light. Leo was fast asleep in the art mechanical bed, his chest rising and falling with a steady, effortless rhythm that he hadn't known in years. Sitting a chair right beside him, her head resting, exhausted, on the edge of the mattress, was Clara. At the soft click of the door, Clara stirred. She blinked her tired eyes and sat up, turning to see the tall, imposing figure of a billionaire standing in the doorway of her private suite. She stood up quickly, suddenly intimidated by the expensive suit and the sheer aura of power the man possessed. "I'm sorry, sir," Clara whispered, jar confused. "Are you with the hospital administration?" Arthur didn't say a word. He stepped fully into light, offering a gentle, familiar smile. He reached up with his weathered hands and lightly touched the frayed, knitted scarf wrapped around his neck. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted from the scarf to the deep, kind wrinkles around his eyes, and finally to the pale blue irises she had looked into in her freezing, drafty apartment. "Arthur," she breathed, the hanging in the silent air. "Yes, my dear." "Did this me?" Arthur softly, his voice carrying the exact same gentle warmth she remembered from her drafty kitchen. He stepped in the room, gesturing slightly with his hand. Marcus walked in, gently placing the small paper bag containing a BRAC coffee and a warm croissant on the bedside table, before bowing his head the hallway and stepping back out in the hallway, closing the door behind him to give him privacy. Clara stood frozen, her exhausted mind struggling to reconcile the fragile, shivering vagrant she had sheltered with the commanding, impeccably dressed, standing before her. She looked at the bespoke charcoal suit, the pristine leather shoes, and then up at the frayed, faded knitted scarf still wrapped securely around his neck. You're not homeless, Clara stammered, her hands of the puzzle as the violins snapped together in her mind. Denacies a sex. She thought of the eviction notices, the name of the property management company, and the anonymous medical grant. You're Arthur Sterling. You own the company. You own my building. I do. Arthur nodded slowly, his pale blue eyes filled with a profound, glittering sorrow. And I owe you the deepest apology for the deception. Clara, I spent 50 years building an empire, only to realize I had lost sight of the people living in its shadows. I went out in the cold to see what kind of men were running my company. What I found was a rot so deep it nearly broke my heart. Arthur took a slow step forward, reaching out to touch the edge of the blanket covering the sleeping boy. My own nephew was perfect blight, you and your brother on the freezing street, just to inflate a quarterly profit margin, Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion. When I was dressed in rags, treated like absolute garbage jets by the executives he employed, the world showed me its darkest face. But then, there was you. Clara brought a hand to her mouth, tears rapidly welling in her eyes as the magnitude of what had washed over her. You were exhausted. You were terrified. You were carrying a burden that would have crushed people twice your age. Arthur said, a singular tear and tracing his sharp blue eyes and tracing a path down his weathered cheek. And yet, you spent your last few coins to buy a beggar breakfast. You stepped between me and a ruthless security guard to shield me from harm. You opened your door. You had absolute nothing left to give. The Sterling Foundation, Clara wept, her voice breaking into breathless sob. It was you. You paid for Leo's surgery. It was the absolute least I could do who restored my faith in humanity. Arthur smiled, pulling a pristine monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and gently pressing it into her trembling hand. I promised you I had a family matter to resolve. Richard and Julian have been permanently removed from the company. The West Side demolitions has been entirely cancelled. Clara looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Cancelled. But the eviction. Voided, Arthur declared with unyielding finality. I have fired the property management team. The building fully renovated into state of the art affordable housing. But affordable housing. Your apartment will be waiting for you, warm and secure. Whenever you are ready to go home, you and Leo will never have to worry about rent again. Clara's knees buckled. She sank in the chair beside Leo's bed, burying her face in her hands as years of terrifying, suffocating anxiety evaporated into the quiet morning air. She cried with the pure, unstrained relief of a survivor who had finally reached the shore. Arthur placed a comforting, fatherly hand on her shoulder. Furthermore, my dear, a woman with your immense resilience, compassion, and unshakable integrity belongs in a boardroom, not behind an espresso machine. I have established a full educational trust for Leo, and when you are ready, there is a permanent, salaried position waiting for you at the Sterling Foundation. We desperately need people who understand the true value of a human life. Just then, a soft, sleepy groan came from the hospital bed. Leo slow fluttered his eyes open, blinking against the morning light. The frightening, rattling wheeze, his chest Was out with a sigh and chest rose, fell with silent, healthy ease. He rubbed his eyes and looked up, spotting the tall man standing beside his sister. "Hi," Leo mumbled groggily, offer a weak but genuine smile. "You look different. Your coat isn't ripped anymore." Arthur let out a rich, joyful laugh that echoed warmly off the hospital walls. "And you look different too, young man. You finally have some color in your cheeks." Clara leaned over, pressing a tender kiss to her brother's forehead, her tears of joy soaking into his hair. She looked back up at Arthur, her heart so full it felt as though it might burst. "My grandfather used to say that you fight cruelly of the world by keeping your door open," Clara whispered, her voice choked with gratitude. Arthur smiled, his hand resting over his heart, right where the charcoal gray scarf lay against his lapel. He had spent his scrapers by the towering heights, his skyscrapers, and the endless zeros, his bank counts. But standing in this quiet hospital room, watching a brother and sister hold each other, Arthur finally understood what true wealth looked like. "Your grandfather was a very wise man, Clara," Arthur said softly. "Because of your open door, I finally found my way home." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next one.